Starting over, is Doug Keene in the chat yet? No? How about Bill Sheridan? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bill and let him talk just a little bit about the beads of courage and any other thing that he would like to discuss.
Okay. Guys, just, one, appreciate everybody. I do have, a couple different people that have contacted me, so they're in process. Thank you both, Stacy and Kevin. Guys, I definitely, whenever you get them ready, I can pick them up. I was hoping to try to get them picked up the last week of this month, first couple days of December, so I can get them over there, before the holidays, get them over to the hospital itself. But anybody else that's willing to make one and starting one, wants information, whatever, please let me know. I'll be sure to help you any way I can. I just appreciate everybody's thoughts and efforts through it. That's all I've got.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Thank you a lot. I appreciate everything you do for us. Give me your ideas and thoughts on what you want to see in these meetings. If you have a particular skill and want to show it off a little bit, this is the place to do it. This is not the big leagues. We'll let you have a mistake or two. That's no big problem. Anything else that anybody else wants to bring up right now? All right, one last thing that I want to ask for. We need somebody to take the office of treasurer for next year, starting in January. Joe has accepted the secretary position, and that allows that office to kind of be split up, so it's just not so much work on one person. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Robert now, and we're going to have a talk from Martian Woodworking.
Well, hello, welcome to my workshop, well, my garage. No cars are permitted, it's only tools. So I appreciate you coming in here. Bob had asked me if I'd do a little talk about resin casting. And so I'm like, okay, I really like doing resin casting overall, so I wanted to give you some good information. I'm going to tell you straight up, I stole some of this data because I thought it was really good. It came from Alumilite's website. They did a little 5-minute podcast. So for those of you who haven't done any resin casting you heard of, well, we got resin, we got epoxy, we got polyurethane, we have all kinds of crazy things, and it's hard to know what the difference is. So fundamentally, let's just talk about some basic information. When we talk about resin, we're really talking about things that, in our case, synthetic. Not the stuff that comes from trees, but things that are made chemically. Well, there's really two types of resin that we use. There is a thermoplastic resin, which is, examples is acrylic, HTPE, and which is the high density polyethylene. All right, things like that. Basically, that thermoplastic is resin that is melted. It's plastic. So they melt the plastic and then they pour it into a mold. All right, then the other one is thermal setting. Thermal setting is polyester resin, epoxy, and it basically comes into two parts, part A and part B. So many of you that have used an epoxy to glue in pen tubes, that is considered a thermal setting type of resin. So, thermal setting really comes out into three categories: polyester, epoxy, and polyurethane. All right, the polyester, it stinks. I'm just going to tell you. It is a stinky process, and it's brittle. A lot of times they use it to coat boats. All right, and whenever they do it, they combine it with fiberglass, so it keeps it as less brittle. They have some other polyester resin that they utilize, but we don't really use that as much. You can use it. Epoxy, an example of epoxy is they're a stiffer plastic, and it's really a good opportunity to do things like river tables, or using it for gluing in our pen blanks and our tubes. Then the last group is probably the one that we use more frequently, is polyurethane. Polyurethane is very versatile. They make foams out of it. They make rubber out of it. It's rigid. It can be clear. It can be tinted. and it's very flexible. So the polyurethane. Now, which one's the better between epoxy and polyurethane? Well, that's the big thing whenever you're using it for wood turning. You need to ask yourself the basic question is, hey, what is my application? Well, so we're really going to focus and talk about epoxy and polyurethane. Epoxy, its products are like this Alumalite clear slow. You can buy this over at Woodcraft. You can buy this, in fact Bob turned it on to me, buying over Hobby Lobby. This thing costs like 23 bucks and it's considered, it falls under the epoxy. Alumalite has some other products. They're Amazing Clear Plus, and then they have a deep pour where if you're pouring really big molds, and it's designed for that. So that is types of epoxy. Now the other factors is what I'm going to talk about is each of these is the product, the time, the moisture level, and the ease of use. Well, we just talked about some of the products. Well, the time when we want to talk about using and mixing this two-part. Now, these are, when we say they're two-part, it's either mixed by volume or by weight. So if you're doing by weight, you know, go to Amazon, spend $5 and have them give you a little scale in grams that, hey, don't steal it from your kitchen. Your wife will kick your ass for stealing her, but it really works great and it's like $5 or $6. I'm not going to bash Woodcraft or anything like that, but they want like 49 bucks. So you can get it really cheaper to buy one of these kitchen ones. So, but the thing about when you mix up the epoxy has a working time, is certain terms we're going to use. It is open time or working time. That is the time you're allowed to mix it up with before it starts getting hard. Then the next thing is a cure time, all right, or demold time is what they would discuss. And that demold time is when can I take it out of my mold. And then finally, when's the final cure time. So when we're talking about resin, and this two-part resin like the clear, it has a 30 to 40 minute working time or open time. So you got a lot of time to play with it. You can mix it and go.
Tell them thumbs up if the audio and video is
Hey,
good.
if I'm not talking loud enough or you can't see the things I'm showing, can you give us a thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, great. So working time. The thing is when we mix up this two-part epoxy, its working time is 30 to 40 minutes. So its working time is considered a linear working time, which means that you mix it, and as it starts molecularly bonding, over time it starts getting hard. Well, it doesn't, and it takes 24 hours for its full hardness. But you have 30 to 40 minutes to get it set, put it in your pressure pot or whatever your application may be. So lots of time. It really works great for it. But if you think you're going to get it out and start working it, well, it has that 24 hours before you can even demold it and start working it. So it has much slower time for cure. But there's some great positives. It's one of those things that it doesn't mind a little bit of moisture. Now, as woodworkers go, I've seen the live demonstrations where someone has turned a piece of wet wood and the water keeps on flying. Well, if you try to use that in the polyurethane, you will ruin your entire project. Now, I wouldn't say to use it with your epoxy, but if there is a little moisture, this is the river tables they're talking about where they pour this right down these live edge pieces. It works really nice and it's tolerant to that moisture, a little bit of moisture. And it is great for working with wood, directly on wood, and it's a great, and it has a high tolerance again for the moisture. Ease of use, I think it's pretty easy to use. It's sympathetic to you. So whenever you're measuring a volume, you know, a little cup at a time, whatever the cups you may need, you know, if you want to do big ones, if you match the volume, it works. One part A, start mixing. So it's pretty easy, flexible. It's not horrible if you don't get it exactly perfect on the spot, but you sacrifice that working time. So epoxy works really well, and the applications I've used, I've liked. The other thing is I use more of it for wood turning because I like speed. I like to get things quicker. And polyurethane is one of those things that I like doing because it allows me to make clearer objects. The working time is a lot quicker, as in the time that we get to use it is fundamentally is if you use a product like Alumilite Slow, you get about 7 minutes to get it into the mold and get it under pressure. Where you use this brand here, which is the Clear Slow, you got 12 minutes. So working with the polyurethane is something you really got to plan out. You can't really just say, well, I'm going to do this and let me get this. And I've got little timers over here that go off. And the working time, I will tell you, between an epoxy and a polyurethane, I said that epoxy is pretty steady state. Polyurethane, on the other hand, is one of these, I'm good, and I start getting hard. And all of a sudden now it's, you just wasted your polyurethane because it got hard, you didn't get it in there. So that's some of the complications with it, but if you plan well, it doesn't. Anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes depending on it. Hey, the nice thing about it, and George has this cooler weather in my garage, it gives me a little bit more working time in the cooler air, in the cooler temperature. So, and you can do that. Demold time. From demolding is basically the time that we take it out of the mold that we're using. It can be as anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So that's pretty good that you're able to take it out of your mold and then have your piece of material. Now, the instructions will tell you if you want it to be fully cured, perfectly hard, all the molecular processes being done, 5 to 7 days. All right. Now, you don't technically need to wait because I've watched guys turn those things within the next day. It's hard for me to do that because, you know, I have to set my stuff aside because I want it. And if you're doing things that are clear, that you want to see through, you probably want to wait wait to closer to the end because they won't be as clear. So, working time. Ease of use. Well, it's pretty easy to use. This scale, I measured out. The nice thing about Alumilite that I'm more familiar with is its part A is the chemical, part B is the hardener. It doesn't mind if I put a little extra hardener in there, but it certainly will mind if I put a little extra of the part A in there, and it will not get hard. The other negative side effect, it is water intolerant. You've heard of lactose intolerant? It is water intolerant. And an example is if we can look at this part here. This is an example of a rose where I took the rose and I dried it out for 24 hours in what's those silica beads. And in the silica beads, I dried it out. Well, when I poured and cast this in and let it set up, you'll see these little bar spots that look actually neat and like I planned it all out. I think Bob had said, hey, there's no error. It is a, what did you call it, Bob?
Opportunity to design.
It's an opportunity to design. Well, this opportunity to design will show you specifically the little drop of water crystallized and exploded out in this. And this is actually an example of a failure in here. The nice thing is I can get away with it as a paperweight in my house as that failure. But as you see that it's tolerance or lack of tolerance to water. So water is not your friend when you're using this. So if you're using wood, stabilize, stabilize, stabilize. Or if you don't have the ability to stabilize your wood, if we can press right back over here, there's at Walmart and just like most of the other places, for 19 bucks you can buy yourself a little toaster oven and just toaster oven the heck out of it and let it dry. And let things dry. And it is going to be very useful because a lot of the molds we use, you need to heat them up before you do it. Because Alumilite, in particular, the polyester resin, the chemical process, whenever you put it in and you have that working time of 5 to 7 minutes, grows great, and then all of a sudden it starts getting hard. Well, that hardness is heating up, and it gets really hot. And it gets really hot there, and it has it will shrink when it cools off. It will become smaller. So some of the molds that I've been collecting molds here for a while, and these are different size molds that you can buy. Woodcraft has a selection of them. You can buy these things through P-Town Subbies, PSI, whoever your favorite distributor is. of there, you buy the molds. Well, these ones here, before you use them, you need to put them in the little toaster oven at about 130 degrees for about 15 minutes beforehand, and let them heat up and warm up. If you don't, you have a tendency to find out when you pull the molds out, all your corners will be sucked in and they'll shrink. So it will cause you a problem. So these molds tendency to be expensive. And when I say expensive, you can spend 30 or 40 bucks for one of these molds. They're great, they work forever. When you use these molds, you're going to use things like a demold agent, which is stoners, or something that's appropriate. You look at whatever you're using for resin, and you use a demold, and they work really good. Well, my wife has let me get away with purchasing these things. I don't think she knows exactly what I've probably purchased. I think this is my little domain. So, for some of you that don't want to go out and spend those big bucks, and you don't want to waste your resin by doing square molds, the nice thing you can get away with is we all have PVC. PVC, PVC, everything in PVC. They're round. They already have a nice shape. Well, how the heck do I use those to keep the thing from coming out? And I'm going to tell you, it's important. Demolding these is to mash these things out, because if they get stuck, you're SOL. So, the nice thing is there's a website is Turner's Warehouse. Turner's Warehouse sells these really cool plugs. They're silicone plugs, and you can get them in a variety of sizes, you know, as small as you want, or as large as you can think to imagine, and put them in the end of your PVCs, pieces of PVC. Put them in there, then you have a ready round mold that you can cast. Now, the question is do I need a pressure pot? Well, pressure pots are really important, and really the key is, the question is what's the difference between a vacuum chamber and a pressure pot? A vacuum chamber sucks air out. All right, a pressure pot doesn't suck any air out, but it squeezes the air molecules down as small as they can possibly be. Now the problem is, if you trap a pocket of air below your object, it's never going to get it out, and you're going to have a pocket of air in your thing, no matter whether you use it. Now, a vacuum chamber sucks the air out and bubbles, 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 bubbles. Imagine if you're boiling a pot of water and see all the bubble goes up, and you put the lid on and it overflows. Well, that's what's going to happen to your resin. If you put it in a mold, it's going to bubble all that out, and 90% of your resin will be on the ground. So let's use the vacuum chambers for things like stabilization. They're ideal. That's what they're designed for.